Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. Enough. The council leader voice thundered through the chamber, shaking the cold stone walls. His segmented face plate shifted, plates grinding like ancient armor as he spoke. The faint glow beneath pulsed his bioluminescent circulatory system, seething just under the surface. The evidence is undeniable, and we can no longer ignore the treason of Braden and Theron. What this council must decide is, do we act before the humans take justice into their own hands? The room erupted into a cacophony of overlapping voices. If we grant them this freedom, a reptilian delegate hissed, his claws clicking against the table, we risk undermining the very authority of this council, Veller of the moral collective shift uneasily in his seat, the translucent skin of his face flushing between hues of violet and blue. These atrocities laid bare before us, are we truly prepared to grant humanity free reign based solely on their own claims of justice? This is not about power, countered a thick-set delegate with metallic skin that gleamed under the chamber's harsh lighting. This is about ensuring that justice is done swiftly before the enemy can regroup and strike. Again, the room crackled with tension, energy palpable as each word struck like the edge of a blade. Chancellor Ludwig, standing tall and imposing in the center of the chaos, raised a hand. I understand your concerns, but let me make one thing abundantly clear. We are not asking for permission. Perhaps you've forgotten case the 29, but let me remind you, humans don't ask for permission. Gasps rippled through the assembly. The holographic display in the center of the table pulsed with the evidence, images of massacres, intercepted communications detailing plans for humanity's eradication, and the brutal aftermath orchestrated by Bragan and Theron's treacherous actions. Ludwig's eyes were cold steel as he met the gaze of the council leader. The participation of humanity in this council has always been valued, and it will continue to be so, but never above the safety of our people, or our right to defend ourselves. We cannot and will not sit idle behind layers of bureaucracy that shield criminals from justice. Bold words. Chancellor Valar interjected, his pale eyes narrowing. You would risk destabilizing everything we have built for the sake of immediate retribution. Ludwig's lips curled into a humorless smile. This is not retribution, Valar. It is prevention. Braden Anth's actions nearly led to our extinction, and certainly they will not stop now. You expect us to gamble on the hope that your processes will deliver justice before it's too late. We have protocols for a reason, barked the insectoid delegate, his mandibles clacking. To act outside them is to invite chaos. Protocols? Ludwig echoed, his voice cold as ice. Let me remind you of case number 29. When the Sarek block cut off supplies to New Horizon, we waited on this council. It nearly cost those people their lives. Humanity launched the offensive, liberated the captives, and exposed the traitor within. We did what was necessary then, and we will do so again. The room was silent save for the subtle hum of the holographic display. Uneasy glances flickered between delegates. The council leader's expression darkened, and he leaned forward, the weight of authority pressing against the chamber. Some delegates fidgeted, others clenched their jaws or averted their eyes. A reptilian delegate's claws curled against the table, his agitation barely contained. You are asking us to ignore the precedent, Chancellor Ludwig, he said gravely. What you propose is dangerous. Ludwig took a step closer, his voice dropping to a measured, lethal tone. Know what I am doing is informing you of our actions. We will pursue Braden and Theon. We will dismantle their network. We will eliminate the threat they pose. If protecting our people means risking our place in this council, then so be it. The words hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Some delegates shot to their feet in outrage, others slumped back in grim resignation. Accusations of arrogance rang out, but amid the chaos, a few voices murmured grudging admiration for Ludwig's defiance. A delegate's voice cut through the uproar, tight with desperation. This will lead to war. You're inviting catastrophe upon us all. A blue-skinned delegate with iridescent eyes rose sharply. Unacceptable. If we allow one species to act independently, it sets a precedent for others to follow, And what if we choose not to act? Garen of the Ashari countered, his deep voice steady resonant. Do we continue to sit passive while innocent lives are lost? The council's inaction has already allowed this threat to fester. Order, the council leader bellowed, slamming a heavy fist onto the table. We will put this matter to a vote. All in favor of allowing humanity to pursue justice independently, cast your votes now. The holographic display shimmered as beams of light flickered above each delegate, forming a constellation of verdicts, the votes tally hanging like an executioner's blade. So the motion is denied, the council leader announced, his tone filled with regret. By majority decision, humanity must adhere to the protocols of this council. If you choose to act alone, Chancellor Ludwig, you do so at the cost of your place among us. A hush fell over the room. Tension so thick it was nearly suffocating. Ludwig stood tall, his expression carved from stone. Without a word, he drew a recording device from his coat and activated it, letting the council's ruling echo through the chamber. As the recording played, Ludwig's cold gaze met the council leader's one final time. Remember this, humans don't ask for permission. He turned and walked away, his footsteps ringing out with quiet determination. The chaos behind him faded into a distant hum, inconsequential to the weight of the decision he had made. Once outside the chamber, Ludwig transmitted the recording to the UED. The notification of humanity's status as outcasts was broadcast into the void, and the Chancellor's eyes hardened with resolve. A war was coming, and humanity would face it on their own terms. The bridge of the USS Kraken was alive with military precision monitors, flickered with incoming transmissions, the hum of the ship's systems underscoring the tense atmosphere. Sir, incoming distress calls. Multiple sources. Lieutenant Rain's voice sliced through the command deck, edged with urgency. He pulled up the transmissions, the glowing screens casting a pale blue light across his face. His expression tightened as he scanned the reports. Alter Colony Caliban 7 Vega Outpost. Sir, they're getting hit hard. Civilian casualties are rising, and their defenses won't hold. Admiral Iwan Addy stepped forward. The lines on his face deepened as his sharp eyes scanned the emergency feeds one by one. He selected the distress calls, the voices of desperate men and women crackling through the interference. They came out of nowhere. Multiple ships breaking through, shields failing. They're not here to raid, they're here to wipe us out. Anyone out there? We need immediate assistance. A brief silence followed, then a final transmission cut through the others, filled with ragged breath and sheer terror. For God's sake, is anyone listening? We can't hold them off. If you hear this, please. The signal cut out. Addy clenched his jaw, opened a direct channel to the hub. A sharp beep followed. As the connection was established, the hub, a massive human-controlled station, served as a central command point for fleet coordination in the sector. This is Admiral Addy, UNS Kraken. Get me an immediate status update. The comm officer on the other end responded, voice taut with urgency. Admiral, we have multiple confirmed incursions in human space. Burdar Confederacy and Varosh Dominion fleets have launched coordinated strikes on our colonies. We're rerouting all available forces, but the scale of these attacks. A brief pause as background chatter blowed through. It's a full-scale invasion. Sir Addy straightened his mind, already running calculations. Understood. I need every available fleet within striking distance to move. Deploy defense squadrons to all colonies immediately. Any patrol ships in Vega sector must regroup and reinforce outposts along the rim. His voice was cold steel, cutting through the uncertainty. We are spread thin, but I don't care if they have to fight with their bare damn hands. We hold the line. I'm en route. In moments, confirmations flooded in. Squadrons reported their readiness. Smaller human vessels answering the call despite the overwhelming odds. UNS Valor rerouting to Alter Striker Squadron engaging over Caliban 7. We'll delay them as long as we can. Recon wings scrambling from Vega. No idea what we're up against, but we'll buy time. A flicker of relief threatened to surface in Addy's mind, but it was cut short. The connection to the hub suddenly crackled with interference. The feed stuttered, voices warping into static. Sir Rains barked, his fingers tightening on the console. We're losing the signal. Heavy interference. If hub falls, Addy cut him off, voice like steel. Then we make damn sure it doesn't. The main screen blurred, then stabilized into fragmented visuals from the hub's external cameras. The image flickered as the comm officer's voice broke through, strained with panic. "We're under attack, unknown vessels, same signature patterns as the Dakfadat, but these," the screen distorted briefly, stabilizing to reveal flashes of sleek, dark-hulled ships streaking through the void. Their movements were too calculated, too aggressive to be simple raiders. The static cleared just long enough for Addie to see it, a massive warship, black as a starless void, slicing through the chaos with ruthless precision. The markings were unmistakable. Then the transmission steadied, and Addie's stomach turned cold as the flagship came into full view. The broker, his blood ran cold. "Damn it, the VOR syndicate scum of the galactic underworld. We crushed them at Vorik, forced them into retreat, and yet here they are, not just attacking hub, but leading the charge." The comm officer's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral L, we're getting reports other stations are under attack too. We're being hit all across the sector." Another blast rocked the hub's structure. The transmission cut to static. Addie muttered, gripping the railing tighter. "We barely kicked their asses out the door, and now they're already crawling back." He spun to his communications officer. "Get me Captain Gat now." Within seconds, the screen flickered to life, revealing Captain George Gat of the UNS Fairman. His dark uniform was slightly disheveled, and the bridge behind him was alive with activity. Admiral Gat greeted with a sharp nod. "We caught the distress calls. The colony's." Addie fists clenched. "Its worst hub is under attack, VOR ships, and that bastard broker is leading the assault." Gat's eyes narrowed. "So it's them. And what about Bragg and Theon?" Addie nodded. "It's them. Bragg and Theron are behind this, orchestrating the attacks while the broker plays his part. This isn't random, it's a coordinated strike. They're making their move." Gat's expression hardened. "Damn bastards, what's the play?" Addie glanced at his tactical screen, weighing options in real time. Every instinct screamed at him to split his forces, but that was suicide. They had to hit back hard, and they had to do it smart. "I'm taking the Kraken and heading straight for the colonies. We hold them, or we lose everything." His gaze locked onto Gat. "But I need you at HUB." "Understood," Gat replied. Addie continued, "Take your fleet to HUB and engage the ferrymen and your support ships. We'll hit them head on. I'll take the colonies. We don't have the numbers, but we can't let them take everything in one strike. Hold the line. I have a plan." Gat PR'd his lips into a thin line. "I'll do what I can, but if they're bringing in syndicate warships, we're outgunned from the start." Addie's voice was firm. "Then fight dirty. You do whatever it takes. Just hold them." Gat's grin was sharp. "Always do." The transmission cut, and Addie turned back to his bridge. "Initiate jump sequence. We move." Now the Kraken's engines roared to life. The stars stretched into streaks of light, and the warship vanished into the void, racing toward the burning colonies. In the heart of the Urark Confederacy, Brayden and Theron stood aboard their warships, their fleets assembling in terrifying formation. Once loyal to the Council, the Urar and Veroch armadas now gathered under the banners of traitors. Bruggen's yellowed eyes gleamed as he observed the final preparations. "We take the Council," he murmured, "and we burn the humans from the stars." Thien hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "Then we begin." Engines roared to life, their glow blazing like vengeful suns. As the armada surged toward the heart of galactic power, the Council will fall. Admiral Addie strode into the medical bay, the hiss of the doors barely fading before his boots struck the floor. With urgency, his gaze locked onto the three Marines, seated on the edge of their recovery stations, their wounds still fresh from battle. "How bad is it?" "I need you on mission now." Julius Turner pushed himself up from the bed, rolling his shoulder experimentally. "I'm insane here." Cathelmafium cracked his knuckles. Already shifting forward, John leered, still stiff from his injuries, exhaled slowly and pushed himself to his feet. His muscles ached, but the medkits had done their job, dulling the pain just enough to move. His ribs throbbed in protest, but he forced his body to obey. Clenching his fists, he steadied himself against the lingering discomfort. "I'm in too, sir." He saw the way Addie's gaze lingered. Addie's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you sure?" Liber adjusted his stance. "As I said before, sir. I've had worse." A slight nod from Addie. "Good, gear up. You leave in 5 on the hub space station." Captain George Gat's fleet ripped out of FTL, emerging into chaos. Syndicate warships choked the void, their black holes weaving through burning wreckage. As they hammered the station's defenses, explosions flared like dying stars, lighting the shattered remains of human ships, while defense turrets buckled under the relentless assault. All wings on Negat's voice cut through the chaos. Steady as iron, we hold the line, make the bleed for every goddamn inch, his fleet answered. Instantly, rail guns, fat molten fury streaks of metal ripping into enemy formations, missiles carved through the wreckage, striking with unmatched precision. Syndicate ships buckled under the relentless barrage, some bursting apart in spectacular detonations, others twisting in desperate evasive maneuvers. Human corvettes snaked through the chaos, dodging enemy fire, while capital ships held firm against the onslaught. Yet for every syndicate fighter destroyed, two more seemed to take its place through the chaos. A transmission crackled through Gat's earpiece. Gat, it's leered. Gat gritted his teeth, twisting the Fairman into a sharp dive as a plasma ram screamed past his hull, rocking the ship violently. About time. What do you need? We need a hole in the broker's ship. Now copy that. He smirked. What the hell are you planning, Marine? No answer. Gat muttered a curse under his breath. Ferry man to all assault wings, target the broker's starboard shields, burn them down. His tactical display flickered with acknowledgments. The UNS Valencia, its hull scarred and limping from previous battles, angled its broadside toward the broker's warship. Valencia, deliver some pain. The cruiser fired everything it had, a brutal cascade of rail guns, slugs, torpedoes, and ionized plasma blasts. The broker's warship shuddered under the bombardment, its shields flaring as they struggled to hold against the overwhelming firepower. Gat was about to call for another volley when his sensors flashed red. A smaller ship was breaking formation, moving straight toward the impact zone. Gat's eyes widened. Oh hell no! From the chaos, Turner's stealth drop ship pitched into a nosedive, darting through the storm of wreckage and cannon fire. Plasma bolts lanced dangerously close, rail gun rounds barely missing as the small craft tore through the battle at breakneck speed. Gat's stomach twisted. His voice rang through the comms. Are you insane? Lee Bird's voice crackled back. We're going in. Gat didn't have time to argue. He could only watch as the drop ship spiraled through the burning husk of a destroyed syndicate frigate, riding the shockwave like a slingshot, using the massive fireball as cover. It shot straight toward the breached hull of the broker's warship. The timing was perfect. Reckless, flawless. Gat's eyes blinked twice as his scanners confirmed it. They had made it inside. He yanked the Fairman into a sharp bank, barely dodging a fresh wave of return fire. There in the battlefield was hellfire consumed the skies. Human colonies burned beneath the relentless assault, their atmospheres choked with smoke and falling debris. The wreckage of destroyed ships drifted aimlessly, some still sparking from recent kills. A lone human fighter twisted violently to evade plasma fire. Its left wing sheared off as it spiraled out of control. A frantic voice cracked through the comms. Mayday, mayday, I've lost stabilis. The transmission cut to static as the fighter vanished in a fireball. Enemy warships dominated the field. Our battle cruisers moved with terrifying efficiency, glowing plasma cannons locking onto the last defensive lines. Verosh dreadnoughts, massive and unmoving, fired relentlessly, their barges tearing through human corvettes like a butcher carving meat. In the middle of it all, the human fleet was being ripped apart. We can't hold them, we need reinforcements. And then the void tore open. The UN Kraken ripped from FTL engines, burning hot, its hull gleaming like a blade in the dark. All ships weapons free. Admiral Ewan Addy's voice roared across the fleet-wide comms. Hit them hard. The Kraken guns came alive. Tungsten rail gun slugs streaked through the void, moving so fast they left molten trails in the vacuum. The first salvo punched through an error destroyer, splitting it apart like it had been struck by a god's hammer. Torpedoes locked onto Verosh capital ships, their warheads detonating in precise chain reactions, blowing apart entire decks in spectacular fireballs on the Kraken's bridge. Addy's gaze swept over the tactical display, his expression carved from stone. Corvette wings split into fire teams, target their missile frigates. First, take away their support. The responses came instantly, the desperation in their voices now replaced by cold determination. Striker squadron moving in, hammer team engaging. Copy that, Admiral. We'll clear the field. Across the battlefield, human pilots tightened their formations. Where there had been chaos, now there was discipline. Ragged survivors turned into coordinated hunters, following the Kraken's lead. The tide was finally turning, and this time humanity was on the hunt. After half an hour of brutal combat, the human fleet was still holding the line, but barely. The Kraken's guns thundered relentlessly, each salvo tearing through enemy formations. But the Urar and Varosh refused to break. Even as their warships burned, they pushed forward, ignoring losses, doubling down on the assault with brutal determination. Human corvettes zigzagged through enemy fire, evading destruction by mere seconds, while frigs formed desperate fawns, shielding the last surviving civilian. Transports. This wasn't a battle anymore, it was a siege. Inside the Kraken's bridge, Lieutenant Rains gripped the tactical console, his voice taut with tension. "Sir, our defenses are holding, but they're not stopping. It's like they're willing to die just to keep us pinned." Admiral Addy's jaw clenched. He could see it too. The enemy should have been retreating, but they weren't. They were stalling for what? His fingers hovered over the armrest controls, his voice razor sharp. "Where the hell are my reinforcements?" As if the universe had answered, the tactical display flared blue. Multiple jump signatures detected. A heartbeat later, the void split open, and Earth's reinforcements arrived like a storm. Massive Leviathan-class battle cruisers ripped from FTL, their engines blazing like comets as they deployed into defensive formations around the colonies. Flanking them were sleek destroyers and nimble frigs, their cannon ports glowing, primed to neutralize any remaining threats. A voice cut through the comms. "This is UNSM Medusa fleet, deployed and reinforcing colony defenses. We've got your back, Kraken." The battle shifted instantly, with human reinforcements fortifying the colonies. The Urar and Varosh fleets lost momentum. Their once coordinated assault fractured. Some ships pressed forward in blind desperation, while others hesitated. Addy didn't waste time. "All ships' priority is colony defense. Take down any hostiles still engaging our stations." The human fleet moved as one. Destroyers positioned themselves between the enemy and the civilian hubs, blasting down any stragglers. Fighter wings swarmed enemy bombers, still attempting desperate runs on human cities. A Varosh battleship, still pushing forward, took a direct salvo from the Medusa's main railgun. The hypervelocity round tore through its spine, splitting the warship into two drifting husks inside the Kraken's bridge. Lieutenant Rains scanned the battlefield. "Sir, some enemy forces are still engaging. They're refusing to retreat." Addy's fists clenched. "Then they die here." The Kraken forward railguns charged. A final wave of fire shredded the remaining Urar and Varosh warships, still pressing the attack. Some tried to break away. Too late, they were cut down in a merciless barrage. And then, at the heart of the chaos, the Urar flagship attempted to flee. Addy's gaze narrowed. The ship was barely holding together, its hull scared and bleeding fire into the void, but its weapons was still online. He didn't hesitate. "Negative, we hold the line. If that flagship makes another pass, it could still do damage. Take it out." The Kraken's broadside cannons locked on fire. Tungsten rounds shredded the flagship's hull. A second later, its reactor ruptured, sending a blinding fireball rippling through space. Then silence. A moment passed before a voice crackled through the comms. "Sir, enemy forces are retreating." Addy watched the surviving Urar and Varosh ships vanish into the dark. "Let them go. Our mission is done." Rains hesitated. Sir Addy didn't respond right away. His gaze lingered on the battlefield, on the wreckage, on the lives lost. Then at last he spoke. "For now, while Ad's battle reached its final moments deep within the broker's warship, another fight was just beginning." Inside, the air was thick with smoke, and the acrid sting of burning metal. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting jagged shadows across the corridor as ruptured conduits hissed with venting steam. The hull breach had collapsed. Entire sections of the passageways, leaving twisted metal hanging like shattered ribs from the ceiling. Leard pressed a hand to his ribs. Pain flared through his side, sharp and insistent, but he shoved it down. No time for weakness. He adjusted his rifle, fingers tightening around the grip. "Let's go end this." They moved forward, shadows against Steel boots gliding soundlessly over the grated floor, a faint scuff ahead. A syndicate guard patrolled the hallway, plasma rifle loose in his grip. He barely registered the movement before Turner's suppressor coughed, and the guard's head snapped back. His body crumpled soundlessly onto the deck. Mahoney didn't spare the corpse a glance, already scanning the path ahead, eyes locked on the reinforced door. A red hollow display flickered beside it, alien script marking it as restricted war room. He's in there. Liberd's grip tightened on his rifle. This was it. Breach on my mark. Mona knelt beside the panel, fingers moving fast, bypassing the security protocols with efficiency. A beat, another. A quiet beep. The lock disengaged. Liberd inhaled. He could hear his own heartbeat. Now the door hissed open, revealing a dark chamber, illuminated only by the pale glow of tactical displays at its center. Seated like a king on his throne was the broker. For a split second his expression remained neutral, calculating. Then his eyes flickered with recognition, and his smirk vanished. The room erupted into chaos. Guards snapped into motion, rifles swinging up too slow. Liber and Turner moved like lightning. 3 shots. The first guard dropped instantly, his weapon barely clearing his holster. The second staggered back as a bullet punched through his throat, gurgling as he crumpled. The third fired wildly. Leered ducked the plasma round, scorching past his head, close enough to feel the heat. Matthew moved fast, 2 steps, an elbow strike, a silence shot. The guard dropped before he even registered it. The silence that followed was deafening. The broker shot up from his chair, his rings clinking against the console as he slammed a fist onto the table again. The broker's rage cracked through his usual composure. Lear stepped forward, pressing the rifle barrel against the broker's forehead. You're done. The broker still smirked, but this time it was all bravado. Slowly he adjusted the rings on his fingers, pretending to be at ease, but his eyes betrayed him. No human. You're done. Unit didn't hesitate. He simply raised his pistol and fired. The shot hit the broker's leg. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The broker screamed, his body jerking violently as blood soaked through his expensive tunic. Mahoney stepped in, his expression as icy as his voice. The next one goes in your head. The broker's body tightened, a ragged breath escaping through his fanged mouth. Pain twisted his face, but his eyes still burned with defiance. Lear pressed the barrel of his rifle against the broker's chest, forcing him back into his chair. Let's try this again. Are you really ready to die for Bragan and Theron? The broker's hands trembled slightly, but he curled them into fists, masking the pain with a sneer. You think killing me changes anything? Matthew tilted his head. His gun didn't waver. I don't know, but I do know it'll change things for you. The sound of round being chambered filled the room. Liber leaned in, his voice dropping to something dark and final. Come on, you're no Bragan. You fight for money, not ideology, and right now your money's worthless. The broker's breathing was shallow, sharp. He shifted slightly in his seat, fingers twitching near the console, searching for any way out. Matthew sighed. I don't think he believes us. He pressed the barrel of his pistol against the broker's forehead. Say the word. Leered. I'll make this quick. The broker's breath hitched. Leered barely blinked. Slow, a single bead of sweat rolled down on the broker's temple. Silence stretched. Then his fingers twitched over the comms panel, and he pressed the transmission key. All syndicate ships, stand down. Withdraw from all human sectors. Now let's get back to Vortex. Liber gave a slow nod. Smart choice. A flicker on a hollow display caught Munn's eye. His frown deepened as he stepped closer. Guys, look at this. Liber and Turner joined him, their expressions darkening as the footage played. A council delegate's voice rang through the room, cold and authoritative. The humans have betrayed the council. They were given a chance to cooperate, but instead they seek revenge. They have already struck against vital outposts. We must act before they take more. The screen flickered. Then came the real damage, a doctored recording of Ludwig at the council chamber. We will hunt them. We will take them down. There will be no mercy. Liber's jaw tightened. That's a damn lie. They cut and twisted the footage to make us look like fanatics. Turner said. Mfune worked the console fast, skimming through data. And it gets worse. The next clip showed Ludwig leaving the council chamber, edited just right. It made it seem like they let him go freely. Chancellor Ludwig has made his intentions clear. He left the council chambers of his own Well, knowing the consequences of his actions, the council must protect itself before it is too late. Leered, dragged a hand down his face. Son of a, they're twisting it to look like the council sanctioned us to hunt Bragan. And Theron Turner shook his head. And now every fleet in the sector will think we're rogue. Mufon's expression darkened. We just got outplayed. Liebird's gaze hardened as he stared at the flickering hollow display. Addie needs to see this. The Kraken hovered over the battlefield like a monolith of steel and fire, its gun batteries cooling after the relentless bombardment that had torn through the last remnants of Arar and Verosh resistance. The human fleet held firm over the colony's Earth reinforcements locking into position. Above the war-scorched planet's wreckage drifted lifelessly in the void, remnants of battle scattering in silence. Admiral Addie stood at the center of the bridge. Eyes locked on the tactical display, the chaos of battle faded into structure. Squadrons patrolled secured sectors, search and rescue teams retrieved survivors, and combat engineers restored damaged outposts. Comm channels swarmed with reports of evacuations and medical crises. Every human vessel had its orders. The line held. Then the emergency channel burst to life. A priority transmission hijacked the Kraken's main screen. The feed crackled with static, the image riddled with distortions. Through the flickering interference, the unmistakable figure of Chancellor Ludwig appeared behind him. The station was a war zone. Red emergency lights pulsed security forces sprinted through the corridors, voices shouting over the chaos. Ewan Ludwig's voice was sharp, strained. Brayden and Theron just arrived. They're inside the council station. The feed jittered. Another explosion shaking the background. Muffled screams and overlapping voices has filled the comms. Security forces are engaging, but we're losing ground. Addie's spine straightened, his jaw clenching. They never truly accepted us, but the Urar Confederacy and Verosh Dominion agreeing to attack the council. That doesn't make sense. Ludwig moved the camera, shaking with him. A blast echoed. In the background, muffled gunfire. It doesn't matter what makes sense anymore. They brought their soldiers. They're taking hostages. The council is under siege. The bridge fell silent. Officers turned, waiting for Addie's next move, the weight of the moment sinking in. Then another screen lit up. Admiral, you need to see this. Liebird's voice was steady but urgent. A transmission file followed, overriding the auxiliary display. The footage flickered to life, chopped together fragments of edited council sessions, manipulated audio distorting the truth. We will hunt them. We will take them down. There will be no mercy. Addie's stomach twisted. The footage was doctored. Ludwig's words had been ripped from context, stitched into a lie. More footage. The council chamber. Ludwig, walking out the edit, made it look as if the council had dismissed him freely, as if they had sanctioned a campaign against Bragan and Theron. Then the final stroke of deception, a broadcast from an Urar general. The humans have betrayed the council. They seek revenge, not justice. The council gave them an opportunity for peace. They have chosen war. Addie's fingers tightened around the edge of the command console. The pieces snapped together. That's why he muttered, half to himself, half to Ludwig, still on the main screen. His eyes moved rapidly, the puzzle clicking into place. That's why Urar and Verosh are fighting like this. They think they're defending themselves. They think we're the aggressors. Ludwig's face darkened. Then we need to expose them. We need to show the truth, or this war only ends when one of us is extinct. Addie's mind raced, assembling the next move. His voice turned razor sharp. Good job, Marines. Now take out the trash and get to the council station. I need you there inside. I'll send you the data and get you covered. Liebird's response was instant. Yes, sir, we're getting pretty good at this. Addie turned to his officers, his voice cutting through the bridge like steel. All ships prepare for immediate jump to the council station. We're not just showing up, we're kicking the damn door in and hitting them hard. Let's make a mess in that place. The Kraken's crew snapped into action. Commands relayed across the fleet. Engines roared to life. The stars outside stretched, warping into the void. Addie turned back to Ludwig, his voice low and cold. We will end this. Jordan, a brief silence. And this is what you will do. Inside the council station, the chamber was a battleground. Gunfire roared through the high ved ceilings as Bragan soldiers Stormed in their sleek armor glinting under the chamber's harsh lights, the alien guards caught off guard barely had time to react before plasma fire tore through their ranks. Some managed to return fire, sharp blue streaks of energy slicing the air, but they were outnumbered. Bodies collapsed onto the polished stone floor, smoke curling from scorched armor plates. Ludwig's fists curled at his sides, his muscles coiled with barely restrained fury as he watched the betrayal unfold. The council leader, his deep green skin catching the dim chamber lights, stepped forward. The rigid plates across his face shifted subtly with emotion as he raised his voice over the turmoil. Brajan, this is madness. You cannot. A sharp crack cut through the chamber. Brajan swung the butt of his weapon against Ludwig's temples, sending the chancellor crashing to his knees. Blood trickled down his forehead. The council leader stiffened, his clawed hands curling against his ceremonial robes as he took an involuntary step back. Brajan turned to face the gathered delegates, his pale yellow eyes gleaming with fury. His massive error friend, framed twice the size of a human, radiated menace. His mandibles twitched, a guttural snarl escaping just before his voice boomed across the chamber. This is why the humans must be eradicated. Look at what they have done. They defy this council. They defy order itself, and yet you hesitate. His gaze swept across the room, resting on the trembling figures of the more uncertain delegates. This war is not about power, it is about survival. The humans will take everything if we do not act now. Thien, standing at Bragan's side, shifted his weight. Unlike his Urar counterpart, the Feroch warlord was leaner, his elongated reptilian face partially obscured by the high collar of his battle uniform. His piercing black eyes darted across the chamber, scanning the room with nervous energy. He could feel the unease settling over the remaining council members. A charged silence gripped the chamber. Some of the delegates, the more radical voices who had opposed humanity's autonomy, looked tempted, glancing at one another, uncertain, but others, including the council leader himself, remained resolute. Ludwig, still on his knees, let out a low-pained chuckle. He tilted his head up, blood dripping onto his collar. You're unraveling, Brian. Even your own ally sees it. Brian's mandibles flared, but before he could respond, the room trembled. A deep, resonating hum pulsed through the walls. The very air seemed to shift. Then it struck. A violent tremor rocked the entire station. The chamber lights flickered. Distant alarms wailed, voices shouting in confusion across the council's internal comms. Theron's head snapped up, his eyes darting to Bragan. What was that? Brand's communicator crackled to life, an urgent voice cutting through. Sir, a human fleet. Just the transmission turned to static. Then the room shuddered again. This time the force was unmistakable. Something massive had just entered the system. Outside, the void split open. The Kraken and its fleet tore from FTL like a tempest of steel and fire straight into battle. The sheer size of the human flagship dwarfed the station security vessels. They emerged at full speed. Weapons already charged. The ferryman and the Valencia flanked the flagship, followed by waves of smaller human warships, corvettes, and cruisers breaking into swift assault pattern. They punched through enemy lines, their cannons unleashing molten fury as they weaved through the enemy ranks, cutting a path through the opposition. The attack was devastating. The council station's defenses were already stretched thin by the presence of Urar and Verosh forces. Now, with the human fleet crashing into the conflict, the battle turned to pure carnage. Sirens blared across the station, defense systems scrambling to react, but the humans had already broken through. The impact of the fleet's assault rumbled through the chamber walls. Tremors rattled the floor beneath them, the distant roar of explosions creeping closer. Brand's mandibles flared, his gaze snapping upward as a guttural growl rumbled from his chest. Look at them, he bellowed, his voice shaking the room. They do not stop. They never stop. They want everything. They want control. They want the council. Some of the delegates recoiled under Bryn's fury. Others exchanged uncertain glances, their hesitation deepening with every distant detonation. Each tremor deepened their doubt. This is why the human plague must be eradicated. Brajan thrust a clawed finger toward Ludwig, who spat blood onto the floor, still reeling from the blow to his skull. They are here to destroy, to take everything. Thien stiffened, his fingers tightening around the grip of his weapon. He could feel something Quan slipping, the weight of an unraveling moment pressing down on him. Outside, the battle roared on, a storm of fire and steel, but amid the wreckage a small craft maneuvered through the chaos, slipping past debris with expert precision. Admiral, we're here. Addie's gaze snapped to the tactical display. The Marine dropship signature appeared small, agile, almost insignificant in the scale of the conflict. Stick to the Kraken, Addie commanded. Stay tight on us. I'll get you a ticket. In Libert's voice carried a smirk. Copy that. The Kraken surged forward, tilting at an aggressive vector that defied every safety protocol. The colossal warship plowed through the fray, a wall of steel shielding Liebird's strikecraft as they tore toward the station. Maintain heading full power to forward shields. Addy barked, his fingers tightening on the command console. The ship shuddered under impact alarms flashing across the displays. The ferryman and Valencia split off to the flanks, drawing fire as they tore through enemy fighters and escort ships, but the Kraken held course, barreling toward the station like a battering ram. The council station filled the view screen. The Kraken wasn't slowing down. Impact in 15 seconds. An officer shouted, alarms blaring across the bridge. We coming in too fast. Good, Addy muttered. Eyes locked forward. The station's shield flared as the Kraken bow smashed into it. A blinding surge of energy rippled outward, violent arcs of light scattering across the void before collapsing. The Kraken plowed forward. The hull slammed into the council station's outer shield, the barrier flaring, energy crackling wildly before rupturing under the dreadnought's. Mass explosions ripped along the impact zone, tearing apart docking platforms and sending debris spiraling into space. A gaping breach split open a moment later. The Kraken's armor buckled. Alarm shrieked across the bridge. But the job was done now. Addy roared. Liebird's drop ship shot forward inside the small craft. Turner's knuckles whitened on the controls. Hold on. The strike team pierced through the breach, dodging burning wreckage as they pushed into the turmoil too fast. The station's damaged stabilizer struggled to compensate for the collision, sending twisted beams and shattered panels tumbling through the Zerg corridors. Then contact. The dropship slammed into the station surface, skidding across the plating like a meteor before coming to a halt near an emergency access port. Turner gritted his teeth, gripping the controls. The station's gravity flickered, unstable from the Kraken collision. Just keeping the craft level was a battle. Hold steady. Liebird barked, already unclipping his harness. We're moving in. The dropship hit the structure, embedding itself against the station. For a second, everything was still. Then the rear hatch burst open. Lear and Turner moved first. Weapons raised. Mfune followed, his visor flashing as he typed rapidly on his wristpad, activating Ludwig's code. His fingers moved quickly over the interface. 321. St. Libert adjusted his grip on his rifle, his voice cold. Leighton and this Bragan staggered as the entire station lurched violently. The impact of the Kraken collision sending tremors through the chamber. A thunderous groan of straining metal reverberated through the walls. Dust and debris rained from above as cracks spread across the ceiling's reinforced plating. For the first time since the battle began, Brand's expression shifted from rage to disbelief. He turned sharply, mandibles flaring as he stared at the shattered chamber doors, then at the flickering holomap display showing the human fleet breaching the station's perimeter. With brute force, his clawed fingers curled into fists as he took a slow, deliberate step forward. His voice seethed with fury. This was a mistake. Theon, standing to his side, visibly tensed, his slitted reptilian eyes darted around the chamber, taking in the crumbling walls, the fallen guards, the council leader's unwavering glare. His long, scaled fingers twitched against the grip of his sidearm. They've come too far, Terran muttered, his tone unsteady. His body was stiff, his tail coiling slightly in what could only be interpreted as apprehension. Bragan, we never silence. Bragan snapped, rounding on him. His mandibles clacked shut, his eyes burning with unhinged desperation. You knew what we were doing. There is no turning back. Now another explosion rocked the station. The lights above flickered wildly, shadows shifting across the walls as the control panel sputtered and buzzed. Then Ludwig saw it amidst the chaos. A single light on a console in the far corner of the chamber pulsed in a strange rhythmic sequence. It was subtle, barely noticeable, against the cascade of system warnings and power fluctuations, but it was there. He narrowed his eyes. The transmission system had been reactivated. Ludwig's breath slowed as realization struck. He had seen these alien communication protocols before. Organic fluid and deeply encrypted. There was no obvious indication of an open channel, no blinking red warning, no system override alert, but the color shift, the soft oscillation of deep violet and amber was the tell. The line was open. Everyone outside the chamber, the entire council, the fleet commanders, the Urar and Varosh forces still locked in battle, was hearing this. They did it. Ludwig nearly spoke, but forced himself to stay focused and stick to the plan. His fingers pressed against the cracked floor as he forced himself onto one knee, blood trailing down his brow. He glanced at Bragan, then Theon, then smirked. Bragan, Ludwig said, his voice deliberately steady, cutting through the tension in the chamber. Tell me something. Bragan snapped his head toward him. You still think you have words that matter? Ludwig wiped the blood from his temple, his smirk unwavering. I just find it funny, he said, slowly watching Bran's posture shift, tension quailing beneath his movements. Funny how you've done all of this, staged this coup, waged this war, butchered entire colonies, and still you needed a lie to make it work. Bragan's mandibles twitched. The room was silent save for the distant rumble of war beyond the walls. Ludwig let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle in. Then he spoke again, deliberate, cutting. You knew the truth before anyone else. You knew the war wasn't about survival, but you needed them to believe it was. That's why you built your lie so carefully, because without it they would have never followed you. Brian snarled. They had to see what I saw. They had to understand. I didn't lie. I gave them clarity. Ludwig tilted his head, his gaze never wavering. So you showed them what they needed to see. Bran's mandibles twitched, his breath grew short, ragged. Then outside the battle faltered across the Urar and Varosh command decks. Officers hesitated, hands hovered over fire controls. Orders to keep firing died on their tongues. On every bridge tactical screens flashed with alerts, the reality sinking in. They had been deceived on the Kraken's bridge. Addie's gaze flicked to the tactical display. Wreckage drifted between still hovering warships. The onslaught had faltered, but the war still teetered on the edge. You don't fight for survival. You never did. Ludwig's voice was calm, sharp. You fight because you wanted control, you wanted power, and that's why you had to fabricate an enemy, because no one follows a cause built on ambition alone. Bragan hand twitched toward his weapon. Ludwig saw the subtle shift in Theon's expression, doubt, uncertainty, fear, and then realization. Theon's breath quickened, his grip on his weapon loosened. I won't. His fingers twitched, his mind racing. Then his voice steadied. I won't die for this. I surrender. The words rang through the chamber, and outside the war collapsed. One by one, Urar and Varosh ships ceased fire, first in scattered pockets, brief moments of hesitation, then spreading like a shock wave through the fleet. What had been an unstoppable onslaught moments ago fractured into disorder. Bragg's face contorted in rage. He could feel it happening, feel his war slipping from his grasp. The truth had shattered the illusion, and now, with the lie exposed, his empire was collapsing in real time. His grip tightened on his sidearm, his breaths turned ragged. His war, his empire of lies, was collapsing before his eyes. He had lost, but he would not be remembered as a man who surrendered. If I go down, Bran snarled, I'm taking you with me. The chamber erupted in motion. The doors burst open. Just as Bragan raised his weapon, Liber Turner and Mufon stormed in, rifles raised ready. Too late. Bragan fired. The plasma round struck Ludwig square in the chest. His breath hitched, a choked, involuntary gasp, his body snapping backward as the searing energy burned through fabric, through flesh. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Ludwig's knees buckled, his body collapsing onto the cold chamber floor. His fingers twitched, reaching for something unseen, his eyes sharp, defiant, until the very end, locked onto Brayden for a fleeting second before the life in them faded. A horrified silence swept through the council. One of the delegates stumbled back, her hands covering her mouth. Another gasped, his eyes wide, disbelief plastered across his face. Even those who had sided against humanity flinched, the raw brutality of the execution settling into their bones. Tan's breath caught his grip on his weapon, loosened. His slitted eyes darted between Ludwig's motionless form and Bragan, as if in that moment he finally saw what they had become. The Marines remained focused on Ludwig's body. Lear stood frozen for half a second, just half a second. It was long enough. Then gunfire. Lear and his team opened fire, cutting down Brogan's remaining loyalists in a ruthless, efficient sweep. Bragan, still clutching his weapon, turned, but the barrage struck before he could react. The first shot ripped into his shoulder, spinning him violently. The second cracked through his chest plate. The third, final, devastating, punched straight through his core. He stumbled, his mandibles twitching, gasping for breath that would never come. His body hit the floor, convulsed once, then stilled forever. It was over. Thien immediately dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, hands raised. The chamber was once more save for the heavy breathing of the Marines and the distant fading sounds of battle beyond the walls. Then footsteps. Admiral Addy stepped through the ruined entrance, his gaze locking onto Ludwig's motionless form. Tension coiled through his fingers. Slowly he stepped forward. The council leader, silent but solemn, removed his ornate cloak and draped it over Ludwig's still body. A breath. The council leader watched Addy in silence. His species had ruled by consensus for centuries, yet in this moment it was not discussion they needed, it was conviction. The council cannot stand without humanity, he said, his deep voice measured, heavy with the weight of everything that had transpired. Addy said nothing at first. He simply stared down at Ludwig, the reality of it settling over him like a crushing tide. He exhaled just once. "I'm sorry, my friend," he murmured. "It shouldn't have ended this way." A breath, then silence. When he finally spoke again, his voice was calm but absolute. "If Earth agrees," he said, "then I will lead." A pause. Then he lifted his chin, steel hardening in his gaze. "But there will be conditions." The chamber waited. "This council will change," Addy continued, "because no species should ever face extinction for wanting to survive." No one spoke. "We will not allow this anymore." Then a slow, deep nod from the council leader. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the cost would never be forgotten. Hey there, Space Human, I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind, or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing, every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.